In the mid-90s, I went on 9 commercial flights that had medical emergencies on board. That voice would come over the overhead projector saying, "Is there a doctor on the plane?" And I am a doctor. And I was on the plane, so I would feel this moral obligation to get up and help out. Fortunately, most of the time, it was people that had fallen down. It was drunks who had fallen down, or drunks who had fallen over, or drunks who had fallen out. But occasionally, it was a real serious medical emergency that scared the living crap out of me. One of the worst, not the worst, but one of the worst was I went on a Delta flight to Salt Lake City early one morning in the middle of January. This is in the mid-90s. The flight attendants, who were called stewardesses then, pushed a tray of warm food, put a tray of, this is how it used to be done, kids. They had hot food in economy. The guy sitting in the aisle across from me, elderly gentleman, leans back, looks at his scrambled eggs, falls over into his scrambled eggs. Completely unconscious, still breathing, drives the flight attendant into complete hysteria. She's screaming, "I need a doctor!" I'm like 12 inches away. "I need a doctor!" I stand up. I say, "I think I can help." She says, "Are you a nurse?" I said, "No, I'm a doctor." Eventually, I talk her into it. We get the guy. We get the guy onto the floor. You know those skinny little aisles you can't even get your carry-on from Costco? We have to put this guy down there. The only way that I can examine him is to straddle him. They bring me a box of ridiculous medical supplies, including a stethoscope that's made out of, like, cocktail straws. I can't hear anything. I have to bend all the way over him with my butt in the air and listen with my ear to his heart, which is quite erratic. I'm completely freaked out. I haven't even had a cup of coffee. And I'm realizing that he's definitely in a coma. He has a very irregular heartbeat. That's not the airplane jet engines. It's his heart. And the flight attendants are pounding me on the back, continuing to ask if I'm a nurse and asking if I want to land the plane. I'm like, "But I don't know how to land a plane." Really, I think I'm in one of those movies where the pilots are incapacitated. So they explain that they mean divert the plane and the pilots will land it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's such a big decision to make without coffee. But I see this guy. This guy is running down the aisle, and he's like a tall white guy that looks like he should be wearing a long white coat. And I think, oh my God, maybe it's a doctor. And it is. And I'm thrilled because he's like a real doctor. He's not a podiatrist or a gynecologist, which is what I usually get at these calls. And he says he wants to help, and he's a family practice from Fall River. And I said, well, that's great. This is what's going on with this guy medically, and they want to know, and I very carefully say, if the pilots should divert the plane and land it. And he goes, oh my God, that's such a big decision to make. And he puts his hands in his hair, and he goes, I really wish I hadn't just taken that sleeping pill because the halcyon is really kicking in. And I turned to the flight attendants and I said, land the plane. And we do. We land in Syracuse in the middle of the snow, and it's really sad. The paramedics come on. The guy actually wakes up, which always happens if you're working in the ER and you tell the 5th floor that somebody's really sick and you have to admit them, then they have an elevator cure. You know, as soon as the elevator door opens, they're like sitting up, they're talking. That's what this guy was doing. But he had to get off the plane and go to the hospital. I never found out what happened at all, which is terrible. But what I did find out with the flight attendant who takes me into the galley, gives me a couple of drinks, this is at 8 in the morning, has some herself, talks about the chest pain she's having. I'm like, shut up. She tells me about that time, totally dismal first aid training that the Delta flight attendants had gotten. I'm sure it's better now, but at that point, it was an 8-hour day, 1 hour of which she told me was dedicated to dealing with the indisposed. I said, what is the indisposed? She said, it's like, if that guy, didn't have a heartbeat. I'm like, you mean if he was dead? She goes, no, he would be indisposed. We would take his body, We would put it in the back row. We would belt him in, turn his head toward the window, and if people asked, we would say he was indisposed. She tells me, this is true. This is the Moth. She tells me the motto that they teach them in Delta flight attendant school is nobody dies on Delta. I'm like, nobody flies on Delta. And I didn't go on another Delta flight for like 15 years. And then when I did, I swear to God, this is true because it's the Moth, somebody fell down on the plane. But it was a flight back from Atlanta. It was a medical conference. There was 56 doctors on the plane. I let like 12 of them help this guy, and in the meanwhile, I sat back, ordered a drink, secure in the knowledge that nobody dies on Delta.